Tonight we're going to talk about a practice that we use in our relationship to deepen connection and cultivate creativity.
So when the first slide comes up, we actually just want you to read this quote silently to yourselves. Okay, now we want everybody to turn to a person sitting next to you, quickly pick one of you, and read it out loud to them. It's going to be the same quote on the screen. Turn to a person next to you, quickly pick one of you, and read it out loud to them. Okay, now start to bring your attention back forward.
So I just want you to take a minute and notice the difference in your experience in reading the quote to yourself and in then having it either read to you or reading it to someone else. Maybe you feel more enlivened, more excited, maybe you feel more nervous, but just notice the difference in how you feel.
So we believe that a way to create deeper connection within ourselves, within our relationships, and with our community is by reading aloud.
To verbalize the written word activates and enlivens it. It creates discussion and inspires connection and opportunity.
We live in a time right now where we're just overloaded with information. We're receiving so much information. And oftentimes we're receiving so much that we're actually only relating to it on a surface level. Basically, we're becoming more and more a society of headline grabbers.
It's as if we're invited into independent conversation with ourselves, where we're expected to receive information and vet it and understand it in the confines of our own minds, which can become somewhat confusing and even sometimes a lonely experience.
But it wasn't necessarily always this way of consuming information as individuals. In fact, historically speaking, reading aloud and sharing information and knowledge aloud was the common way. It wasn't up until about the mid-1700s that people started reading to themselves.
And we even read a little bit in a research study that said that reading aloud or reading to yourself was considered rude. So, of course, it's really important to read to children as a way for them to learn how to read and to begin to have comprehension and understanding.
In fact, a U.S. Department of Education study found that absolutely the best way to improve a children's reading and especially comprehension skills was by reading aloud to them.
But this is also really important for adults. So this is how we learn how to socialize, how we understand intonation and explication, and how we understand what we believe and what others believe.
In fact, one researcher called it facilitating narrative transport, in which the reader and the receiver actually was gaining wisdom and knowledge and not just receiving information.
So we read a really tender study about a couple whose dog passed away, and they were in such a place of grief that they were losing words to say to each other, and so they were zoning out on their phones and watching television, and so they decided to begin reading to each other as a way to begin to return to some sort of contact where the words were already written for them.
So when Marisol and I met, we actually quickly, right near the start, started. Sorry, wrong slide.
But we're really cute. But this isn't.
But we're really cute. But we actually just discovered that we truly value deeper connection as an activist and a therapist as a way to create change and healing in the communities we are working with.
Right, and that it was really important to start with the people who are closest to us, where we've already built trust and love, as a way to begin to vet our ideas in a place where where it was free of judgment or scrutiny.
Yeah, and now I'm on the right slide, but we actually originally started just reading novels out loud to each other pretty early on in our relationship as just something that we like to do.
Just sort of organically, I always wanted somebody to read to me.
Exactly, but we realized pretty quickly that this was creating avenues for deep connection and growth within our relationship.
Yeah, so we are always reading a novel together, but we're also talking about reading articles and newspapers and even social media posts, and it's just an opportunity for us to come together. It's a conversation starter and a way to begin to have deep conversations between the two of us.
And there's several benefits that we've found for our relationship. One of those being listening. So listening is a key part of communication in a relationship. And when I listen to Marisol read aloud to me, I'm not only hearing the words that she's saying, but I'm listening to I'm learning how she describes situations. I'm learning how she describes things, which has super amount of benefits in communication on other things in our relationship.
And it also helps us learn how to debate and to have conflict, because we're reading about social and cultural and environmental and political issues, and then we're sparking conversation, and we're discussing these difficult topics and learning how to talk them out before we talk about how our ideas are impacted in the larger community.
It also helps with creativity in our relationship. Reading aloud is kind of like having a shared project as a couple, and so by having those projects, you learn how to be more creative with each other, both as an individual and as a couple, two minds working better than one.
And I would just say that overall, it's been a really healing process for us. It's a thread of connection that maintains in our relationship at all times.
Yeah. And so we have just a couple of takeaways that we want to give. One is that if you want to start reading aloud, just start small. You don't have to start with some huge novel. You can start with an article, even a social media post that you find interesting. Read that aloud with your partner or a close friend and start the discussion afterwards.
And the second one is around pacing. So it takes more time to read to each other. It takes more time to read aloud. And so we actually have to carve time out of our schedules to slow ourselves down and to make space for this important sacred practice for us.
And finally, just a reminder that it's not actually about what you're reading. You don't have to be reading something profound. It's about the practice of reading aloud to each other and then the discussion that follows afterwards. So thank you all for listening so much. We just go out there and read aloud with each other. And one thing we would just like to say that if you do want to hear more conversations from Marisol and I, we did recently launch a podcast called Reading Aloud, and you can find that on anywhere you get your podcasts. So thank you.